Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lucas Tribune podcast. We hope all is well. Let's get into our topic this morning. Mark, did you know that the average person makes over 35,000 decisions every single day? But here's what's fascinating. A growing number of those choices are now wrapped in layers of moral and political significance, leading to what experts are calling an epidemic of moral fatigue.
That's such an interesting statistic, and it really explains why people are feeling so overwhelmed these days. Even simple decisions like what to eat for lunch can turn into ethical dilemmas.
You know what's really striking about this phenomenon? Research shows that prolonged exposure to moral decision making actually depletes our mental resources in the same way physical exercise tires our muscles.
Hmm, that explains why I feel completely drained after spending time on social media, where every post seems to demand some kind of moral stance.
Exactly. And here's what's particularly concerning. Studies indicate that about 67% of Americans report feeling exhausted by the constant pressure to take positions on political and social issues. It's literally changing how our brains process information.
Well, that's pretty alarming. How are people actually coping with this level of constant moral pressure?
So get this. Mental health professionals are seeing a fascinating trend where people are creating what they call moral sanctuaries, designated spaces or times where they consciously step away from ethical decision making. It's like giving your moral compass a chance to recalibrate.
That makes me think about how different this is from even just 5 years ago. The constant connectivity has really amplified everything.
Oh, absolutely. And here's a mind blowing statistic. The average person now encounters more than 150 politically charged messages per day on social media alone. That's a 300% increase from just a decade ago.
You know what's really interesting about that? The way it's affecting different generations differently. I've seen studies suggesting that younger people are actually developing new psychological defense mechanisms.
Exactly. And this is where it gets fascinating. Researchers have identified something called selective moral disengagement, where people are becoming incredibly strategic about which issues they allow themselves to engage with deeply.
That reminds me of something I read about decision fatigue in general. How even judges make significantly different decisions depending on how many cases they've heard that day.
Well, that's such a perfect parallel because moral fatigue operates in very similar ways. By the end of the day, our capacity for nuanced ethical thinking becomes seriously compromised. Studies show that moral reasoning abilities can decline by up to 40% after prolonged exposure to ethical dilemmas.
That's a staggering number. What are the long term implications for society if we're all operating with diminished moral reasoning capabilities?
That's where some really innovative solutions are emerging. For instance, some organizations are now implementing what they call moral recovery periods, structured breaks from high stakes ethical decision making. They're seeing improvements in both decision quality and employee well being.
So it's like creating designated recovery periods, similar to how athletes need rest between training sessions.
Precisely, and here's what's really encouraging. Companies that have implemented these recovery periods are reporting a 45% reduction in workplace conflict and a 30% increase in employee satisfaction. But here's the catch. It requires a complete rethinking of how we engage with moral and political issues.
That's fascinating. How are people actually implementing these boundaries in their daily lives?
Well, the most successful approaches involve what experts call the 3R strategy: recognize, restrict, and recover. People are learning to recognize their moral fatigue triggers, restrict their exposure to constant ethical decisions, and actively recover through specific activities that restore their moral energy.
Like what we're seeing with the rise of digital detox retreats and meditation apps focused specifically on moral resilience.
Exactly. And get this. Participants in these programs report an average 60% improvement in their ability to engage meaningfully with important social issues. It's not about checking out completely, it's about engaging more effectively.
That really challenges the common assumption that being constantly engaged is the most responsible way to be a citizen.
You know what's really interesting about that? Historical research shows that some of the most effective social movements actually incorporated regular periods of retreat and reflection. It wasn't seen as disengagement, but as necessary preparation for sustained activism.
That's such a powerful reframe of how we think about moral engagement and social responsibility.
And here's where we're seeing real change happen. Communities are starting to create what sociologists call moral oases, physical spaces and regular gatherings where people can discuss challenging issues without the pressure of immediate position taking.
That sounds like it could really transform how we handle difficult conversations as a society.
Well, the early data is incredibly promising. These spaces are showing a 70% success rate in facilitating productive discussions about contentious issues. But perhaps more importantly, participants report feeling energized rather than drained after these interactions.
That really brings us full circle to where we started, finding ways to engage with important issues without burning out.
Exactly. And as we wrap up, here's something to think about. Moral fatigue isn't just a personal challenge, it's a societal issue that requires collective solutions. But the good news is, we're starting to understand how to address it effectively.
And it sounds like the key is finding that balance between engagement and recovery.
You know what? That might be the most important insight of all, that taking care of our moral energy isn't selfish. It's actually essential for sustained, meaningful engagement with the issues that matter most.